Hi everyone, Dreckie here, and today we're looking at the Canon IVREC, a camera best described with 3 letters, WTF. What was Canon thinking when they made this camera? Well, let's open the box, take a look at some video samples, and see if we can find out. Inside of the box you have the camera itself, a little quick start guide that is just pictures, there's no words on it, it's basically telling you to download the app, micro USB cable for charging. Keep in mind, this may not be exact packaging because I bought this camera secondhand. No way, based on other reviews, would I pay full price for this thing. Nonetheless, it's going to be fun to take a look at, so let's get a close look at the camera. The camera itself is extremely simple. You have a fixed focus lens on the front of the camera. There's no autofocus with this. Rubberized finish around the edges. This little clip for putting it onto something. A battery door that comes with a hinge and is waterproofed ever so slightly. And on the back, there's no screen, only this mode switch. So it's basically like you look through here, I guess, and try and figure out what you're going to be shooting that way. But we'll see how well it works in practice. Overall, build quality is pretty good though. That rubberized, water-resistant finish feels nice and sturdy in the hands, buttons feel good, and that clip is solid, so it'll stay on whatever you put it on. But if you already have a cell phone or a GoPro, this camera's somewhere in between the two and it doesn't really make sense.
The camera itself has almost no buttons, and that makes it super easy to use. Flick it to photo or video mode and then press the top button to start recording. Startup is quick, so there's very little delay. It does have a beep to start and stop the video that cannot be turned off, as well as the fake camera shutter sound that most cheap action cams use. When you're filming with the IVREC, your video options are pretty limited. You've got 3 resolutions, 1080p 60, which is what I filmed nearly all this video in, 1080p 30, which is the camera's default resolution, and 720p 30, which is the resolution the camera is limited to in live view mode. So in live view mode, you're limited to 720p 30, which I find absolutely ridiculous because live view mode acts more like a remote than it does an actual camera feature. For example, files are not immediately saved to your smartphone. You have to go into the playback menu and then download them separately. It's not like a drone where files are simultaneously saved to your phone and your camera, where I could understand the lower resolution so that it streams a little bit clearer. But I guess when you go into playback mode and you try and play back a 1080p 60 video or a 1080p 30 video versus a 720p 30 video, they do glitch a lot, so they're probably limiting the resolution just so that you don't see that glitching when you're doing live view. The app itself is fine for the most part, although I noticed a good 2 seconds of lag in live video, as well as some serious glitching in file playback, especially with 1080p files. You'll have to download them manually to your phone if you want to watch them, as there's no automatic synchronization whatsoever. As for video quality, aside from the unboxing in the intro, everything that you've seen and heard so far has been shot with the Canon IVREC. And for a 1080p 60 camera, it's not too bad. It's pretty on par with other mid-range GoPro clones, such as the Thai T5e, but that makes sense seeing as they're based on the same Ambarella A12 processor. Unfortunately, there are some downsides compared to other GoPro clones though. For example, GoPro clones have a screen, and they have far more features that I've come to rely on, such as time-lapse, manual video settings, and 4K. Aside from lacking those features, video quality at 1080p 60 is not too bad overall. Color processing is good, albeit sometimes pushing a bit too yellow depending on what's in the frame. The videos have tons of detail, albeit over-sharpened a little bit as there are some sharpening artifacts around fine details. Exposure in general is handled well, only occasionally getting too blown out, but that was mostly the case when shooting flowers around my neighborhood with bright, punchy colors that even my cell phone struggled to reproduce. The results are mostly pleasant-looking videos and photos. I also suspect that there's some basic image stabilization going on because I'm not usually this steady when I'm walking and holding the camera out in front of me. Normally I'm a little bit more bouncy, but it is pretty basic, as you'll see when I start jogging here. Nowhere near the power of a real GoPro or the DJI type cameras, more similar to the cheaper, older budget action cams. But any praise that I give this camera towards its video quality is in bright, well-lit situations. On a sunny or even overcast day, video quality is alright, but once it starts to get dark out, results get poor. This camera wants a lot of light, and when it gets dark, the video turns mushy and smeared. For best quality at night, turn the camera to 1080p 30. It doesn't use an auto low light feature, meaning that 60 FPS will be darker because it's double the shutter speed. The camera is also not afraid to push its nighttime ISO to the point where video starts looking like it was drawn with big blocky markers, but I respect at least that I can see something visible in these shots where I'm under the street light. Alright, this is a night and low light test with the Canon IV Rec set to 1080p 60. Alright, now this is a night and low light shot in 1080p 30. I have no idea if the video quality is going to be better, but I have a suspicion it will be. Normally these cameras do lock their shutter speed to 1/60th of a second or 1/30th of a second, which means that you're getting twice the brightness in 1080p 30 than you would get in 1080p 60. Perhaps a more apt comparison is the front-facing camera on the Galaxy S9, but I have a feeling that at night and low light, even this small sensor camera will do better than the Canon. Just for comparison's sake, this is what night video looks like on my S9, and I can almost guarantee you this will definitively prove that your cell phone will be a significantly better camera than this IV Rec. So I'm holding the Canon IV Rec with my smartphone right behind it, and my smartphone's lens is looking through the Canon IV Rec's square view hole, whatever you want to call it. So this is pretty much a direct one-to-one comparison between these two cameras. You'll hear audio quality, you'll see video quality. Like for example, I have no idea what any of this night footage is going to look like. And I won't have any idea until I go and look at it on the computer. I know that my phone's going to be better. Virtually any modern smartphone in the mid to high range is waterproof these days, and with an extra case it's also shockproof. So maybe the Canon IV Rec made sense 5 years ago, but these days it's too little too late. It's kind of like Canon figured, hey, the GoPro Hero 2 is a great camera, let's make that! Not only do phones have screens so you can actually see what you're taking a photo of, but they also have this software processing that is basically magic. During the daytime, my Samsung S9, which is over 2 years old at this point, has better color processing, better dynamic range, more detail, and an autofocus lens, which means I can actually get close up to things and have them in focus. I can touch the thing I want on screen, take a photo of it, and it will be crystal clear. For video, there's more detail, more resolution, touch focus, manual settings, better stabilization, and well, I could go on and on. Essentially with the IV, you're spending $129 on an inferior camera in every single way. It just isn't really even useful as an action camera either. So if you need to have your smartphone as a screen for the Canon IV Rec, what's the point of having this camera anyways? Your phone's going to take substantially better photos than the IV Rec will, take substantially better video. Your phone will have autofocus, your phone will have HDR. I just don't get it really. Then again, maybe this camera isn't exactly meant for me. Maybe it's meant for the kind of person who doesn't really care how their photos turn out. I feel like the $149 asking price is a little bit high for what is essentially a Chinese action cam, slapped with the Canon brand name and without a screen. Like an old school GoPro, and you can buy one of those used for 50 bucks or less. One other thing, this camera is way too close up on your face to just hold it out in front of you and vlog. You're gonna have to use a dreaded selfie stick. Look at all that cottonwood. But when it comes down to it, I think the point of the IV Rec is its simplicity. Get rid of all those distractions, get rid of the extra buttons, get rid of the settings. It's more akin to shooting film than shooting digital. When I go out with the IV Rec, I'm not using the app at all. So when I take a photo or a video, I have to come back, sit down, and look at it at the end of the day. And I guess if I really wanted that film experience, I could even throw in a 512 megabyte or 256 megabyte SD card, and then suddenly I can only take 10 photos. Speaking of still photos, I think that's 80% the point of this camera, and probably is gonna only be 10% of this video. The camera is supposed to pair with Canon's IV instant printers, but since I don't have one of those on hand, I printed some photos on my laser printer before remembering that it's not color. And well, yeah. Nonetheless, the photos this camera takes are decent enough, but they still have all the same limitations as the video. poor dynamic range compared to a cell phone, a fixed focused lens means things are out of focus. In the end, you either need to get creative with how you shoot or just not care what the final image is going to look like. I took 100 images of all the flowering bushes around the neighborhood with both this ivy and my cell phone, and 90% of the time I preferred my phone by far. Frankly though, autofocus is the main reason that the ivy is lacking. With autofocus, things would actually look really quite good. This color is alright, detail is alright when it's in focus. It's just that I found myself getting close to things I wanted to photograph and then they were blurry, and that's it. So check out this comparison here in particular. Yeah. I've spent the entire video complaining about the faults of this camera, yet I've actually had fun with it. There's something neat about going out, taking a bunch of photos and videos, then coming back at the end of the day to see how they turned out, not getting that instant gratification that you get with a smartphone or a normal camera. It's kind of a novelty. It reminds me of stepping back to the days of film photography where you just have no idea if your photo's going to turn out. It's actually the case with the Ivy Rec. You don't really know. Is that worth $129 though? Hell no. I would not ever advise going out to buy this camera at full price. But there are a bunch of people selling them secondhand on eBay for between $30 and $50. And for me, someone who works as a professional photographer and carefully crafts every photo he takes, someone who spends 5 minutes or more setting up photos on my phone because they have to be the best quality I can get. Well, for me, stepping back and not really caring about how things turned out has almost been an enlightening experience. I found myself actually having fun with photography and shooting things around the neighborhood that would just be ridiculous, not because it would necessarily make a good photo. And perhaps in a few weeks the novelty of it will wear off, and the Canon Ivy Rec will find a place in my cupboard amongst the other cameras that I never use. But until that point comes around, yeah, I'm gonna go out for another walk and take more silly photos with this thing. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, comment. I appreciate all your support.